Hi, and welcome to Code Tutorials. Today we'll be taking a look at how you can create graphs using the Graphs widget from our Qi Addons for Elementor plugin. With this widget, you can create graphs of different looks and styles to match your site perfectly. There are options to adjust line thickness, color, labels, and legends, anything you like. You'll be able to pick how the graph will look, whether it will have lines that will be curved or angled, whether the space between the lines will be filled, and whether you'll use lines at all instead of bars to display everything you need to. With the Graph widget, you can present study findings, survey results, business achievements, market share value, and much more. Alright, now let's see how we can make one of these for ourselves. Head over to the back end, and in the Elementor sidebar, search for Graphs. There it is. Now drag it over to the page. We can see right away that this widget has some default placeholder content. We'll start by customizing that content. There are 3 items here to match the 3 lines in the graph, and I'll be showing you how to customize them a bit later. For now, the first thing I want us to look at is the data labels field. This is where we'll set the values that will be shown along the x-axis of our graph. So these are the values shown at the bottom of our graph. I'll replace the default ones and set 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. When you're typing in these values, the labels for your graph, you need to make sure to separate them with commas. Also, as I'm typing, you might notice that the graph is expanding. Each added data label will add another section to the graph. Okay, now that we've set the width of our graph, let's head over to the Style tab. I want to show you some of the settings there before we carry on with customizing the content. The first set of options here deals with the graph style, and within it we have options like graph type, where we can pick between having a graph with lines or one with bars. I'll stick with lines for now as we go over these options, and then I'll show you the bar type a bit later in this video. And I'll skip graph alignment as well because I can't show it effectively without adjusting my graph size first. So for graph size, the value you set can be in pixels, percentages, or ems. I'll switch to percentages and set, let's say, 87%. And now I can show you the graph alignment option. It's very straightforward. The default alignment is left, that's flex start. You can change that to center or switch it to the right, which is flex end. Alright, I'll put this back to flex start. Following this, we have the border width option. This applies to the graph lines actually. Let me show you. See? As I increase the values, the lines get thicker. I'll set 3 pixels for mine. Then the next set of options is for the legend style. And here for starters, we can opt to enable the chart legend. So if I switch this to yes, I'll get a legend for my graph. It's positioned at the top by default, but you can change that to left, bottom, or right. I'm going to set mine at the bottom. Then we have the legend alignment option. So once you've chosen your legend position, you can choose the alignment within that position. The default setting puts it at the center, but you can switch that to start so it's on the left, or end so it's on the right. I'll use default to stick with the center. Below this, we have the legend bar width option. It applies to these little squares in the legend. You can use the slider to adjust the width or type in a new value here. I'll set 8 pixels for mine to make it smaller than the default. And we have a similar option for the height, where I'll set another 8 pixels and make legend bar height match the width. That way I get square-shaped legend bars. Okay, then the legend bar margin option allows us to put more space between the bars in the legend. I'll set mine at 40 pixels, and we can see that the bars have moved apart. Underneath this, we have the legend label color. This lets us change the color of the legend text. You can move the slider to change it or set a hex code. I'll make my label practically black by adding a hex code for the shade I want. There. Next, we have the legend label font option where we can pick the font family for the labels. I'll search for the one I want to use as I know its name. Okay. Alongside this, there's the legend label font size. I'll set 16 pixels for mine. And with the legend label font weight, we can make our label text thicker by setting it to black, or make it lighter by using one of the lower number values such as median. Okay, following that we have the tick style set of options. So this is where we set the values that will show along the y-axis of our graph. I'll start by setting the minimum data value, meaning the value that starts the progression, this one, to be 0. Next, I'll set the maximum data value, which determines the highest value on the graph's y-axis, this one, to stay at 80. But then I'll change the step size. This is where we set the range of the data points shown on the y-axis. It's 10 by default, so the values are shown in increments of 10, but I'll change that to 20. So now the values go 0, then 20, 40, 60, and 80. Alright, with that we've covered all the Style tab options, so we can head back to the Content tab and see what we have left there. Now, in our general settings, we have these dataset items. By default, there are 3 of them. Essentially, each item represents a graph line. If you'd like your chart to have more lines, click here to add a new one. And now we have 4 graph lines. But I don't need this many for our show and tell, so I'll remove it. Now let's open the first item. The first field is where you enter your dataset values, i.e. the points that your line will be charting in the graph. To simplify, this is how you set the curvature of your line. Let me demonstrate. I'll replace these default values with my own. Make sure to separate each number with a comma. So each of these points is charted at the intersection of the data values. My first number, 39, charts the point just under 40 where it intersects with the first month. My next number is 62 and it charts the point just over 60 where it intersects with the third month. The point I'm trying to make is that each dataset value you put here will match with a data label underneath, 1 month, 3 months, etc. If you set 10 values here, but you have 3 labels, only 3 of those 10 values will be shown in your graph. Okay, the next field, dataset labels, lets us set the text that will be displayed in the chart legend. Think of it as naming your line. I'll call this one, I don't know, photography. Okay. Then line color lets us change the color of our line. You can use the slider or add a hex code. I'll do the latter and make my line a grayish-violet color. And I'll copy it as I want to use the same shade again. Now I'll skip down to area color and paste in the shade that I used for my line color. Okay. I skipped hover line color as it only works with bar graphs, so there's no need for me to do anything with it as I have a line graph at the moment. And the same goes for the hover area color. I'll explain more when we get to the bar type graph. For now, let's take a look at the filling modes option. Now this one only works with line graphs, and let me show you what it does. The values you add here are numerical. If you add +1, it will fill the space between the first and second lines with your chosen area color. +2 will color the space between your first and third line, and so on. You can also set different colors for the line and the area, if you like. Alright, the next applicable option we have is the Enable Linear mode. And this one is designed for line type graphs only. If we set it to yes, the line becomes angled, so the charted points aren't shown on a curved line. Instead, we get sharp angles where the dataset values are. Now you can enable this for all your lines so that the entire graph would be styled the same. Since my design includes curving lines, I'll put this back. Okay, now I'm going to customize my remaining 2 lines, but since they have all the same options we've just seen, I'll skip ahead with the video. Okay, here I am at the last line and I wanted to show you something. I'm going to set a line color that will have a degree of transparency. I'll show you why I'm doing this in a moment. You can tell that my line color is somewhat transparent thanks to the position of this slider here. I'll copy its hex code so I can set it as my area color as well. Paste. Just a sec. There. Now for the filling modes. I'll input a value that will fill the area from my last line all the way to the graph bottom. And that value is origin. There we go. The whole area to the graph bottom is covered and we can see the graph grid showing through the new color because it's partially transparent. Alright, with this we covered almost all the options we have for the line graph type. And before I can proceed to show you the graph type with bars, I want to briefly touch on the developer tools. When we open them, we can see there's just one option here. And we can switch its setting to yes and get it to display the widget in the form of a standard WordPress shortcode. So that's this text. which we can easily copy for use elsewhere on our site. Alright, that's all I wanted here. So now we can take a look at the other graph type. Let's open the element search and look for graphs again. There. Then drag it over to the right. We'll get the same default content and graph type, but I want to change a few things before we switch it. I'll change the data labels for my new graph. I'm going through all of this relatively quickly because the options are the same and I don't want to waste your time by going into detail about them again. Okay, while I'm here, I'll also remove one of the dataset items. So, now we can move on to the Style tab. And in here, I'll change the graph type from line to bar. There we go. This is what it looks like before stylization. I have 2 bars in each data label section and they represent the 2 dataset items. Okay, I'll keep the graph alignment the way it is, but I'll change the graph size. I'll switch to percentages and put 85%, so it goes well with the size of my line graph. Following that, we have the border width option. The border is the dark gray line around each of the bars. You can type in a new value to make the border wider, but I want to turn it off entirely, so I'll simply set 0 here. But there's still a border on hover. It's this whitish gray line around the bars. So I'll set my hover border width to 0 to disable this one too. Below that, we have the bar size and category size options. The category size lets us adjust how much space the bars will take up within each section of the x-axis on the graph. Let me demonstrate. If I set 1, it will make the bars and their padding take up 100% of the width of the available space. If I set 0.5%, then the bars and their padding will take up half of the available space. I'll leave it like this for now. And let's take a look at the bar size option. If I set 1 here, it means the bars will occupy all the space we gave them when we set the category size. No padding anymore. So, half of the graph section will be dedicated to the bars, and those bars will cover that entire space. And the other half of the section will be left blank because we set it that way in category size. Now, if I set 0.5 for the bar size as well, the bars will shrink to 50% of what they were a moment ago. The remaining 50% will become their padding. Okay, now that we covered that, I'm going to adjust the values to my preference. So I'll put 0.88% for my bar size and 0.6% for my category size. Just to avoid any confusion, all of this was for the bar width in a way. The bar height, however, is adjusted by setting the dataset values for each item within the Content tab. I'll be sorting that out a bit later. Alright, moving on to the legend style section. And in here I want to enable the legend as I did for the line graph. Okay, and I'll put it at the bottom as well. And I'll make some adjustments to the width and height of the legend bars by setting 11 pixels for both. Then I'll put more space between the legend bars by putting 40 here. There we are. Next, I'll add the legend label color and use an almost black shade. I'm making these settings to match somewhat with my first graph. But we've already seen how all these work. Right now, I just want to show you how they relate to a different graph type and demonstrate how quickly and easily you'll be able to set everything up once you get a hang of this widget. And let me set the tick style as well. 0, 80, 20. There, perfect. So that's that for the Style tab. And now we can go back to the Content tab and see how to set the dataset values on a graph with bars. Now I have 2 dataset items here. That translates into 2 bars in each section of the graph. When I open the first item, the values I replace here will apply to the first bar in each section, so the bar on the left. Now, just add your new values and don't forget to separate them with commas. And I'll use the same dataset labels here as I did for my first graph legend. It's just a showcase. Okay, next I'll remove the line color. This is for the bar border color, but since I disabled the border by setting 0 for its width, there's no point in me keeping the color. In case you didn't turn off your border, this is where you change its color. And the same goes for the hover line color, the border color on hover. But for area color, which will change the actual bar color, I'll set a hex code for the same grayish violet color I have on my first graph. and I'll copy it so I can use it for the hover area color, which is the bar color on hover. Okay. I wanted to use the color everywhere so my bar wouldn't change its look if anyone moves over it. Of course, you're free to create a different design if you like to. This is all down to preference. And I've skipped the filling modes option as it only works on line graphs, and you can see a little note about that here. And that's it for my first item or bar. Now on to the second one. Since we just went through these options a moment ago, I'll speed through my customization work. First, the dataset values, then the dataset labels. Following that, the color settings. I'll use my chosen shade for both the regular and the on-hover bar color. Okay, there we go. My element is done, so I'll update to save my work. And we can take one last look at the widgets page. Having gone over the options in the back end, you should now know how to make all of these design variations. This page simply shows you some examples that you can mirror or use as inspiration. Of course, you can also create something completely unique. You just need to decide which of the possibilities offered by the Graphs widget work best with the style and design of your site. Ultimately, I hope going through this together has helped you to see how easy making elements can be with the Qi Addons for Elementor plugin and its Graphs widget. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please drop us a line in the comments below. Also, make sure to subscribe to our channel and be the first to learn about new theme guides and tutorials. Thanks for watching!